What is going on, guys? Well, I decided to take time today to talk about a subject that has been a surprisingly popular debate that I have seen all over the internet over the last couple of weeks. And that is the debate on whether or not the marketing, the trailer for Radio Silence's latest film, Abigail, destroyed the movie or not. There are passionate views on both sides. I've seen very few people on the middle on this one. And to be quite honest with you, it's an argument that has been puzzling and honestly frustrating for me to see become this big narrative surrounding this film. So to kind of give away my stance on this right away, my thesis in regards to this is that no, the trailer did not ruin the film whatsoever. And I'm going to get into all my reasons, my defenses for that. But I also kind of want to discuss the other side of it, discuss some of the more popular arguments of why the marketing campaign has ruined this movie for certain people, and kind of talk about the greater issue there. So it's just something that, because I love Abigail so much, this is my favorite film of the year so far. I actually toyed with the notion of going to see it a third time this weekend. I didn't, but that doesn't mean I might not go this weekend. But I love the film, had a great time with it. Most people that I've talked to had a great time with it, and people not having a good time with it for whatever reason is perfectly fine. You know, we all have our own preferences, our own taste in movies, but just the specific notion that the trailer, and even more specifically, knowing that Abigail was a vampire, destroyed the experience that this movie sought out to create. That's kind of what I want to discuss here and very heavily argue against. So a number of months ago, we got the first trailer for Abigail. It's a film that was not on my radar. All I really knew was that Melissa Barrera had a couple films coming out, one of which was made by Radio Silence. And shortly after knowing that is when I saw this trailer and said, oh, this must be the movie then. And absolutely, this trailer and even the poster to a certain degree really doesn't bother itself to hide or mask the ultimate reveal that Abigail is a vampire and the antagonist of this film.
Guys.
Oh, no.
And that was something that is kind of the sales pitch and the setup of the film. So I will tell you right off the bat, I did not watch the entire trailer when it was released. I watched just enough where it got to like vampire stuff, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm sold. I don't need to see anymore. And that's actually a practice that I have really adopted over the last number of years. In fact, before I even get into any of this, the notion that modern movie marketing has serious issues, and even more specifically in relation to horror films, tend to give away way too much that can absolutely affect your experience with the film in a negative way. I 100,000% subscribe to that. So the overall umbrella argument, I'm on your side with as far as marketing just being an issue. And I think that the younger generations and TikTok brain and where their data and their analytics are telling them which trailers perform better. I mean, Jason Blum infamously said this years ago when he was called out for all of his trailers basically being a compartmentalized version of the film. Said, yeah, I agree with you, but that's what my numbers say succeeds, so we're going to keep doing it. That's just the unfortunate reality. So that's why over the last 15 years or so, I have very much adopted the practice of kind of tapering down almost to not watching trailers at all, especially when it comes to horror. I'm of the mentality that if I hear buzz about something, or if I know just enough about the premise to sell me, I don't need to watch the trailer to be sold further. I much prefer walking into that film, knowing the little bit that I know or nothing, and actually experiencing the film and the events of the story and certain reveals that are planned by the filmmaker in the way that it was intended. And more times than not, that leads to a very satisfying movie experience. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you walk in, you're like, oh, fuck, that was not the movie that I probably would have liked. If I would have saw the trailer, I would have known better. This wasn't for me. That happens sometimes. But more times than not, it's a beneficial experience. So I recommend a lot of you guys starting to adopt that. Don't watch trailers or don't watch the full trailer. Something else that I will say. As I said, I didn't watch the whole trailer to Abigail. Since the movie has been released and I've seen it and I dropped my review after the Overlook Film Festival, I have since gone back and watched the trailer, more specifically whenever I was editing my review. I usually take trailer footage and splice it in there. And I will agree that this trailer gives away a bit too much. There are very quick little glances and images that hint at some third act events and the fates of certain characters that I certainly wish would not in the trailer. And there have been a couple of people that have honed more in on that side of it, saying it's not necessarily that the vampire reveal ruined the film. It's just that the overall trailer gave away so much of the plot and so much of third act stuff that did negatively affect my experience. That I can understand. That I think is a very sound argument, and I've said so to the people that have honed in on that. But unfortunately, most people that have taken this stance have not honed in on that and rather have just stuck to the very basic premise that knowing Abigail was a vampire before walking into this film destroyed the movie, destroyed my movie experience, made the movie suffer greatly. And that's the side of it that really puzzles me that I'm going to have to argue against. First of all, I walked into this film knowing good and well that Abigail was a vampire. I mean, that's the entire sales pitch of the film. That's the entire setup. And I think that the movie, and Radio Silence more specifically, knew that when they were making it. I don't think they ever thought that this movie was going to hide that in the marketing, and maybe they wouldn't even want it to. Like I said, that's the sales pitch of the movie. Is there maybe a version of marketing where they could have just focused on the kidnapping plot and hinted very vaguely at something supernatural or something horrific coming with that premise? Possibly, but I don't know how successful that would have been at marketing the film effectively at all, because I think that the majority of people that went to go check out Abigail, probably the vast majority of people, were sold by the vampire ballerina premise. They said, fuck yeah, I want to see that. It wasn't the kidnapping plot. It wasn't even Radio Silence or Melissa Barrera's attachment, though I'm sure that excited a lot of people, certainly did me. It was vampire ballerina movie. Fuck yeah, I'm there. And so the thing about when you make a film is that you have to craft it in a way to where it can still be a very effective and whole experience, even with certain plot details being given in the marketing. More specifically, if you have a major reveal planned for the first or second act that is, in fact, your sales pitch, because you can basically bet your ass it's going to be in the marketing somewhere. And in my opinion, I think that Abigail works perfectly fine if you know that Abigail is the enemy, is the antagonist of the film, and is a vampire. You know, you have the first 35, 40 minutes of this film that is crafted in a way where you have the characters that they gather Abigail, they go to this isolated location to wait for the ransom to be paid, and then suddenly things start to go wrong and they get picked off one by one. And I've seen people take the argument that the movie fails because they choose to treat the first act and even part of the second act as this mystery of what is going on, when everybody that goes to see the film already knows the answer to the mystery, and therefore the first half or so of the film is extremely boring because you're just waiting for things to kick in, and they're treating the audience as if they don't know something that they absolutely do. And my argument against that is that if you watch this film without knowing, you know, I haven't seen the marketing or without knowing the plot of Abigail, yes, it actually is framed as being somewhat of a mystery of what is going on. Who's picking these people off? Who is, I think it was Alvarez is the name that they're kind of giving us, like the mythical, the muscle of this father that they're doing the ransom for, all these little details. But my argument for that is that if you watch the film knowing that Abigail is in fact the one doing all of this, it's not so much that the first two acts are destroyed, it's that it's just a different experience. It's now more focused on developing these characters and developing their individual character dynamics with each other, and very comedically exploring their distrust of each other and them quickly turning on each other in the midst of them being picked off one by one, which I found to be extremely enjoyable. I knew it was Abigail. There was never a mystery there. There was never like, yeah, Alvarez, whatever. It's obviously Abigail. Like all the stuff you guys are going for, you don't have the answer, but I do. I'm ahead of the characters. But the film still functions really well in those first act and a half because it's so comedic to watch them jump to all these conclusions and very quickly turn their guns on each other until the ultimate reveal that Abigail is the one doing all this and she's a vampire. And I even saw someone take it even further, and I'm going to paraphrase what they said, but it was essentially like, if the marketing gives away that she's a vampire, the movie should just start there. Don't waste our time with any build up to it or any kind of mystery element in the first act or so. Just start there if you're going to give it away in the trailer. And again, my argument against that is, what movie doesn't have build up to the eventual premise of the film or the sales pitch, if you will? Like, what movies just start immediately with everything kicking off and all the characters having all the knowledge that they need for the plot of the film? Almost none. So I that's another very odd argument to me. Like, hey, we were sold on Vampire Ballerina, so just start with Vampire Ballerina. Don't waste 45 minutes building characters. I don't understand that. I passionately disagree with that argument. I mean, I walked into Avengers Endgame wanting to see the Avengers reunite and kick the shit out of Thanos. I didn't expect the movie to start there. I knew there was going to be build up to that eventual payoff for the third act. So again, an argument that very much doesn't make sense to me and just doesn't make sense in the midst of how you tell stories. Like, the marketing should never dictate the filmmaking. The filmmaking should dictate the marketing. And as I said, if you have a film that inevitably your twist or your little plot secret is going to be given away before the first half of the film, that's very much part of your setup, then you need to have a film that functions with the audience having that knowledge. And again, in my opinion, I think Abigail very much succeeds at that. You have the initial setup, you have the gathering of these characters, you have the exploration of each individual characters to build out who they are and what their personality and their contribution to this scenario and the story is going to be. You have their bickering back and forth. You have the mystery element that's brought in of like, what the hell is happening here? This is not the plot that we signed up for. And then the eventual reveal that Abigail, the person that they were tasked with kidnapping, is now the author of their doom. And what are we going to do to survive that? And that, to me, functions very well as a build up to a reveal and then a very entertaining other half or so of the film. Think about something like From Dusk Till Dawn, which is actually a perfect little parallel example here. You have that film that takes even longer to get to the vampire stuff than Abigail, quite a bit longer. And while there's not too many people out there that had the very cool experience of watching that film without knowing where things were going to go once they got to the titty twister, it's a film that very much openly markets itself as a crime thriller that eventually has vampires in it. And so you have half or more of that film that is very distinctly just a Quentin Tarantino crime thriller following two bad people that kidnap a bunch of good people and are trying to get across the border. And then you have all the vampire shit that's unleashed in the back half, or maybe even just the third act. It's late in that movie before it happens. I don't know many people, or at least I haven't talked with many people that have the argument of, if it's a vampire film, just start there. If you're going to have it in the trailer, then just start there. The movie should start with George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino walking into that bar. That's how the first 5 minutes of the film should be. And I don't know many people that look at that plot and say, well, because we know there's vampires, all the shit that happens before vampires is just boring because we eventually know it's going to be vampires. So why toy around with it? Why act like we don't know what's going to happen? And to reinforce that example, a number of other films that I could think of that have a major first or second act twist. Terminator 2, perfect example. Anybody that watched that first Terminator knows that Arnold Schwarzenegger is the bad guy. So you start Terminator 2 off with him returning and another person coming back in the form of Robert Patrick, who intentionally looks very similar build-wise as Kyle Reese. And the first 15, 20 minutes of that film intentionally toys with the viewer on when to reveal that Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually the Protector this time around. They intentionally do not state overtly what the mission of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Robert Patrick is until that scene in the hallway where you have both of them come face to face with John Connor in the middle and Arnold Schwarzenegger says, "Get down." And it's revealed in that moment that the T-800 is actually the Protector this time. I don't know anybody that watched Terminator 2 that didn't already know Arnold Schwarzenegger was the good guy. I mean, most people on Earth that have seen that film have seen it to where it's already common pop culture knowledge that that Arnold Schwarzenegger is the good guy in the majority of that franchise. So does that film crumble because you walk in as an audience member knowing that twist? And is it a waste of time in the first 15, 20 minutes of that film to play coy with it? I would argue heavily against that notion. Think of something like Psycho. Psycho takes about half of its film to get to its major plot reveal, which is that Janet Leigh's character is going to get killed, and it's actually about the other stuff in the second half of the film. And most people that watch Psycho know that. Not the people that were there on release, but most people since then, the majority of people that have watched Psycho on planet Earth know that. And I would say that that doesn't destroy that film whatsoever. Mission Impossible. First act of the film, the entire crew, the entire Mission Impossible team is killed off except for Tom Cruise. That was a major twist from the plot of the television show that they did not really give away in the marketing so much as they just really focused on Tom Cruise in the marketing. But does that film crumble because there's a first act twist that most people walk in knowing this is Tom Cruise's movie and he's going to be by himself doing things? I think even Alien. You know, we know that it's a space exploration thing, and then eventually there's going to be some things that happen, and most people that watch that film know, yeah, the xenomorph is coming. There's going to be an alien impregnation in somebody, and there's going to be an alien stuck on this ship. Like, we know the basic reveal of what's going to happen, and people love that movie. And Scream is another one. It's kind of a smaller example because it's just the opening scene, but does that film crumble if you know that Drew Barrymore is not the actual face of this franchise now that we're 6 films in? I would argue no. So, like, I'm not trying to put Abigail on the same pedestal because I just named some of the greatest films of all time. But it's the same argument to me of, like, because I knew the major plot of this film that it's just destroyed. And I could just continue naming examples of how that has never been the case for so many films, and which increases my confusion of why Abigail specifically has been so held accountable for this. Like, this is just the biggest example of a trailer destroying a film, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. And the final thing that I'll add in here is that, you know, I saw Abigail at its world premiere at the Overlook Film Festival. Again, knowing full well what the plot of the film was, and they don't hide that anywhere. They didn't hide it in the pre-movie Q&A or any of that stuff. Like, again, radio silence, I'm 95% sure, knew that the whole world was going to know this was a vampire film and completely crafted the movie to survive despite that. Like, they were never going to have a version of this film that they tried to hide that from anybody. But for experiment's sake, even before this argument took hold online, after I saw the film and I loved it as much as I did, I called my dad and I said, hey, there's this movie that comes out in a couple of weeks. I really want to take you to see it. I don't want you to watch any trailers. I don't want you to look anything up about it. And I was pretty sure he wasn't going to anyway, because he's not nearly as tied into movie pop culture as me. But I said, we're going to go see it. And my dad rarely goes to the theater. So I think that it excited him that I was that passionate. Like, okay, I must really like this then. It's going to be cool. So I took him to go see Abigail opening night. He didn't know anything about it besides the name of the film. I don't even think he saw the poster. So he didn't know anything about the plot. He was pretty sure it was going to be a horror film just because of what I do in the film festival that I saw it at. But that's all he knew was probably a horror film, and it's called Abigail. That's it. We watched the film, and my dad absolutely loved it. Said it was one of the best films he's seen in theaters in years. And he basically liked and honed in on all the same things that I did about reasons why it was great. But you know, the one thing that he didn't say was, like, this highlight of his experience was not knowing the plot when he walked in. In fact, to the contrary, he said as soon as the movie ended and we were starting to talk about it, one of the first things that he said was, yeah, I mean, I figured out pretty quickly that the little girl was going to be like some kind of a monster, but that was really cool. And when I watched it the second time, I actually paid very close attention to everything that was being shown and everything that was being said in the first act of the film. And I'm here to tell you, the movie doesn't really try that hard to hide things. Like, this is not some major shocking reveal. It might be for a few people, but for the most part, I would assume that the majority of movie fans would have been able to figure out, if nothing else, that Abigail's the bad guy and there's some kind of monstrous edge here. Maybe not full on that she's a vampire, but nonetheless, the major reveal is not really hidden that much. I mean, you have imagery where it shows the house with bat-like creatures surrounding it in that picture that Angus Cloud finds. You have that very deliberate line given by Abigail when Melissa Barrera goes to turn away, and she says, "Joey," and she turns around and she goes, "I'm sorry for what's about to happen to you." Like, that line in and of itself and the facial expression of Abigail tells you this bitch is going to fuck them up. She's sinister. There's something going on there. So that even more so makes me frustrated with this. Like, okay, let's go to an alternate history where this trailer never revealed that. And I guarantee you the movie experience would still be pretty much the same for most people that watched it. Like, this is not like a Sixth Sense level surprise that was given away in the trailer. This is something that, yeah, for some people would be cool to experience without knowing that, as I argue is what I try to do with most horror films. But this is not a movie that really, really locks its secret behind lock and key. It's pretty well out there, hinted at directly throughout the first 30, 40 minutes of the film. So I don't want to go on for too long. This has just been something that's really bugged the shit out of me and something that I've chimed in quite a bit about over the last week or so. And I'm very curious to see what you guys think about it. You know, I've seen some of you in my comment section. So clearly there are a number of people that do subscribe to the fact that the trailer was a giant negative on their experience with this film, but it just doesn't make any sense to me, and those are the reasons why. So if you get nothing else out of this video, take your ass to go see Abigail and give it a chance, because it deserves a lot more money than it's making, and it's probably going to end up being, if nothing else, my second favorite film of the year. But that's if we have like one hell of a surprise coming for the rest of 2024. I love it. Well, that's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to stick my review of Abigail down here if you want my in-depth thoughts on the film itself. I'm also going to stick my top 10 vampire films up here if you're a fan of that subgenre. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.